Okay.
Everybody, it's Hans is on with me, and my name is Natai. We're reading from Coming Back still, and we're going to be reading chapter 3 today. You won't be able to see Hans if you're watching the video format of this because his webcam, ones he has, are currently not really functioning. So, and with COVID rearing its ugly head again, we are doing social distancing again. So you have to deal with my face.
Your beautiful mug.
Yeah. We'll get right into this chapter 3 here, and this is called Soul Research. There's a little quote I guess I'll read right before we start the whole thing, but yeah, there's nothing else here to explain. So I'll just read this little quote, and then we'll get into, I'll just read straight through to Windsor, and I'll read as Windsor, and then Hans is going to be reading as A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. So when we're going back and forth in conversation, it is as a doctor, I believe, is who Windsor is. Is that who this person is?
Yeah, he's a Canadian heart surgeon.
Okay. All right, cool. So I'm going to go ahead and read this little intro and right into his line, and we'll go from there. Soul research. Although advanced in understanding the mechanical workings of the physical body, modern science gives little attention to analyzing the spiritual spark that animates the body. In the Montreal Gazette article reproduced below, we find world-famous cardiologist Wilfred G. Bigelow urging systematic research to determine what the soul is and where it comes from. Reproduced next is Srila Prabhupada's letter in response to Dr. Bigelow's plea. Srila Prabhupada presents substantial Vedic evidence about the science of the soul and suggests a practical method for scientifically understanding the spiritual spark that gives the body life and makes reincarnation a reality. Montreal Gazette headline: Heart surgeon wants to know what a soul is.
Sounds like a. Sounds like no. It's just like you imagine seeing that in the newspaper, like.
Right? You just open up
Sounds like something a heart surgeon may want to know. Okay.
Okay. Windsor, a world-famous Canadian heart surgeon, says he believes the body has a soul, which departs at death, and says theologians ought to try and find out more about it. I did not read that well. I'm going to do that again. Windsor, a world-famous Canadian heart surgeon, says he believes the body has a soul, which departs at death, and says theologians ought to try to find out more about it. Dr. Wilfred G. Bigelow, head of the cardiovascular surgery unit at Toronto General Hospital, said that, quote, as a person who believes there is a soul, end quote, he thought the time had, there's another quote then? He thought the time had come, quote, to take the mystery out of this and find out what it is, end quote. Bigelow was a member of a panel which appeared before the Essex County Medical Legal Society to discuss problems associated with attempts to define the exact moment of death. The question has become vital in the age of transplants of hearts and other organs in cases when the donors are inevitably dying. The Canadian Medical Association has produced a widely accepted definition of death as the moment when the patient is in coma, responds to no stimulus of any kind. The brain waves recorded on a machine are flat. The other members of the panel were Justice Edson L. Haynes of the Ontario Supreme Court and J. Francis Leddy, president of the University of Windsor. Bigelow, elaborating on points he had raised during the discussion, said in an interview later that his 32 years as a surgeon had left him no doubts that there is a soul. Quote, there are certain cases where you happen to be present at the moment when people pass from a living state to death, and some mysterious changes take place. Quote, one of the most notable is the sudden lack of life or luster to the eyes. They become opaque and literally lifeless. It's difficult to document what you observe. In fact, I don't think it can be documented very well. End quote. Bigelow, who became world-renowned for his pioneering work in the deep freeze surgical technique known as hypothermia, and for his heart valve surgery, said, quote, soul research, end quote, should be undertaken by theology and allied disciplines within the university. During this discussion, Letty said that I'm having trouble tracking all these people, but Letty is another doctor, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Letty said that.
Real quick, sit just a tiny bit forward towards the mic, because at wherever you are, there you go.
All right.
It was just cutting out a little bit. I think it was at the distance of where it was picking up.
Gotcha. Yeah. I'll just move this a little bit then. Hold on. Let me just adjust this.
Okay. So yeah, Letty is another one of these panel members.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
One of the panels. Oh, okay. Yeah, J. Francis Letty. He's the president of the University of Windsor. Okay.
Yeah.
During this discussion, Letty said that if there is a soul, you are not going to see it. You are not going to find it. Quote, if there is a principle of vitality or life, what is it? End quote. The problem is that, quote, the soul doesn't exist anywhere specifically, geographically. It's everywhere, and yet it's nowhere in the body, end quote. Oh, another quote. It would be nice to start experimenting, but I don't know how you're going to get data on any of these things, end quote. Letty said. He said the discussion reminded him of the Soviet cosmonaut who returned from space to report there was no God because he did not see him up there. Well, I went up to space and he wasn't there, so
Yep.
Nobody was home. Maybe so, said Bigelow, but in modern medicine, when something was encountered that could not be explained, quote, the watchword is discover the answer. Take it into the laboratory. Take it somewhere where you can discover the truth, end quote. The central question, said Bigelow, is where is the soul and where does it come from?
I really like this because I mean, I work in healthcare, and it's it's a profession where it's funny because, like, I guess maybe not to many people, but to me, kind of when I was younger, I used to think that the medical profession, like, it's oftentimes full of people that are very scientifically minded, and so sometimes you maybe think that first impressions on meeting a doctor or a nurse or whoever, you kind of get the sense that they're very, like, there's like a professionalism. It's just like kind of prim and proper, and you come in and I'm here, I'm dealing with the physical, but a lot of times it was only until I started working in the medical field that I realized, like, even though it is full of people that are very scientifically minded, there's also a lot of, when you deal with this kind of this area of life, there's a lot of things that are not answered necessarily scientifically. And so a lot of the nurses and doctors and stuff that I've worked with, paramedics, whatever, they all have, like, their own little spiritual beliefs that, like, because of what they see, it becomes really, like, solidified with them. And it's, like, here he's saying how they have to I'm presuming one of the biggest debates today is someone's on life support, can you take them off? When is it ethically right to do so? Like, those kind of things crop up. And so, like, he's the body can be, if you're on the machines, the body can be kept alive for a long time without, and I say alive, meaning, like, the heart is beating, the lungs are getting air put into it, but there's nothing really there. So you're keeping the shell alive. It's like, you have, that car in the garage that, it's your show car, and you just take it out and you fire it up once a month to kind of, like, make sure all the rust is out of, like, that's all you're really doing. But if we understand, they talked earlier there about the brain waves, right?
Yeah.
and in Vedic, like, thought, you have the soul, which is us, and then it's covered by the mind, the intelligence, the false ego. So that's your subtle body, or what you would attribute to like a ghost. That's which is what follows you from life to life. And so, and then you have your meat suit, your physical body.
Yeah.
And it's it's, I don't know, it's just weird to I don't even know how to really put exactly what I was trying to say, but it's just something that people kind of take for granted. Just the living, breathing thing, body, and oh, that's my dad or that's my mom, and blah blah blah. But when all of a sudden it stops working, people get all freaked out. And like today at work, Shara had to do CPR. That was like her first time ever doing it. And she was like, "Oh God," and she did good, but it like,
oof. I mean, what you were saying earlier too about the idea of like this science. I think a lot of things in the world in general get boiled down to this black and white, this yes, no, right and wrong kind of stance on things, which then maintains this position where you can't really agree with people because, neither one of you has to be 100% right, neither one has to be 100% wrong. But like even with science and then like religion, which is of course words that we've, over time used, and they have meanings based on how we've used them. I mean, the words themselves were at some point made up, but science is really a study of the world we live in, and religion is a belief system to some extent, and about like a lot of it has to do with like creationism, what they like to call it, as if it's the opposite of science. But then science also attempts to create things all the time. So I don't think that they're really that different, which is, I guess, that's the cool thing about our religion or science that we follow, we were born into, is that they are sort of similar. That they're like part of each other. It's not like one has to be the prevailing one. Yeah, science is part of the creation, part of the world.
Yeah.
And yes, you can study the world and learn things about it and learn how to replicate certain things. But there are some things that you can't do
that science can't quite.
Yeah, because of our own limitations, we can only get so far or understand so much at this point in time, at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really
it's a very interesting topic, to say the least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how my voice is sounding either, because I'm
you sound good, actually.
Stuffed up, but okay.
It's better than last week. It's coming through really clear, and yeah, your voice sounds good. You can go ahead and start from where I left off with Srila Prabhupada.
Alrighty.
I'll start in.
So Srila Prabhupada, I'm guessing, read, or one of the devotees or his disciples showed him that article, and he then crafted a clever retort to Dr. Bigelow. Srila Prabhupada presents the Vedic evidence. Nice headline right there. My dear Dr. Bigelow, please accept my greetings. I recently read an article in the Gazette by Ray Corelli entitled Heart Surgeon Wants to Know What a Soul Is. I could just imagine Prabhupada's face as he's reading this, like, I have something for him. Okay, I remember I recently read an article in the Gazette by Ray Corelli entitled Heart Surgeon Wants to Know What a Soul Is, and found it very interesting. Your comments show great insight, so I thought to write you on this matter. Perhaps, and I love how he's coming at this too. It's not like you know nothing, and here, let me present this to you. It's like,
it's not like, you're wrong. Here's the truth.
So perhaps you may know that I am the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. I have several temples in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, and Hamilton. This Krishna consciousness movement is specifically meant to teach every soul his original spiritual position. Undoubtedly, the soul is present in the heart of the living entity, and it is the source of all the energies which maintain the body. So undoubtedly, the soul is present in the heart of the living entity, and it is the source of all of the energies which maintain the body. That's interesting because even in like science, right, you learn about the heart, and there's these little cells in the heart that are unique to only the heart, and they normally, because the heart is a muscle, normally the heart, or normally muscles only contract when, you know, your body uses, chemical reactions to create, like an electrical stimulus to the muscle, which contracts it. Whereas the heart, they have cells that generate their own electric, spark, essentially. That's the pacemaker cells in the heart. When those go out, then your heart ceases to beat. So it's interesting how in the Vedas they always say, oh, the soul resides in the heart, but then scientifically your heart, those AV node and the SA node, they are the source of the impulse that causes the heart to beat on its own. Anyway, undoubtedly the soul is present in the heart of the living entity, and it is the source of all the energies which maintain the body. The energy of the soul is spread all over the body, and this is known as consciousness. Since this consciousness spreads the energy of the soul all over the body, one feels pain and pleasure in every part of the body. The soul is individual, and he transmigrates from one body to another, just as a person transmigrates from boyhood to youth and then to advanced old age. Death takes place when we change to a new body, just as we change from our old dress to a new dress. This is called the transmigration of the soul. When a soul wants to enjoy the material world, forgetting his real home in the spiritual world, he takes this life of hard struggle for existence. This unnatural life of repeated birth, death, disease, and old age can be stopped when his consciousness is dovetailed with the supreme consciousness of God. That is the basic principle of the Krishna consciousness movement. As far as heart transplants are concerned, there is no question of success unless the recipient's soul enters the transplanted heart. Okay. Which, we know, okay, he's not like denying that transplants don't work.
Yeah.
So the presence of the soul must be accepted. In sexual intercourse, if there is no soul, there is no conception or no pregnancy. Contraception deteriorates the womb so that it is no longer a good place for the soul. That is against the order of God. By the order of God, a soul is sent to a particular womb. But by contraceptive methods, he is denied that womb and has to be placed in another. That is disobedience to the Supreme. For example, take a man who is supposed to live in a particular apartment. If the situation there is so disturbed that he cannot enter the apartment, then he is put at a great disadvantage. That constitutes illegal interference and is punishable by law.
No, that's interesting.
It is an interesting way of looking at that.
I was under the, I guess, I don't know if I really given this tons of thought, but I was also under the, like you would almost think that if, like, let's say that, I mean, it's not just about sexual intercourse, but just in general, that if something didn't happen or did happen, it was just sort of like, I never thought about it being in like, instead of what was directed to happen. Does that make sense? I thought it was like an end result of like my karma, this person's karma, the other person's karma. And if the kid's gonna get, if like in this example, if the woman's gonna get pregnant, she's gonna get pregnant. Not that as a result of her using whatever contraceptive methods or him using whatever contraceptive methods, that because of that, the kid they were supposed to have, they won't have.
I think what it means is, what I got from it was just that, obviously you have the free choice, the freedom to make the choice. Right. But if you make the choice, what you're doing is, and that's the thing is, karma is, it entangles everything that interacts with everything else, just
Yeah.
like the law of gravity. So you making the choice to use the contraceptive, you're making that choice, but that choice is now affecting whatever potential child
Mm-hmm.
you may have made, right?
Right.
That child is like, oh, here, here it's my karma to have, be born into this family, and
Right.
now it's getting removed. So you're now putting that living entity at a disadvantage because maybe, I mean, granted, if it's their karma to be born into a decent family, they may end up going, that's where kind of like it gets really complex and
Well, yeah,
complicated.
because then you're
But
thinking about
then,
some of these situations where, like, if you do have a baby, or if you whatever, then, like, and your life is in a really bad place, or you're not safe, and you're putting the kid in the same situation,
true.
those kinds of things. Not to say, I know he's not saying that in really, but that's the thought process that went on my mind when you read that. It was kind of like it's very interesting. I had never thought about it from that exact angle before, I guess.
Yeah. And then elsewhere, I need to start taking notes better when I read something that's interesting that I'm like, oh, shoot, I want to talk about that next time. But kind of regarding this, maybe it was further on in this chapter, or in this book I think it was with Jod Barrett, and
Oh
when
yeah,
he's
there's,
not wanting to step on the ants.
there's some stories we're coming up on. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but in there, and then also there was somebody else, somewhere else, maybe it was a lecture or something, but basically it was saying that, right, so the ants, perfect
Hmm.
example. I kill ants in my house all the time. They're crawling on the countertop, and I'm like, get out of here. I don't have to kill them, but I do.
Right.
And what I was getting from, what I had read was that if you if you take if you cut somebody's life short unnecessarily, whether
Mm.
it's another human being, just any living entity, you cut their life short. When you're born into a life, you're allotted, you know, obviously your karma is going to dictate when you die. But the thing
Right.
is, if you're going through that life, you're meant to be like, uh, getting some lessons from whatever you're going through. Whether it's an animal body, or whatever.
Right.
And when that's cut short, you have to. See, now I'm gonna have to look this up because it got pretty deep. But you're basically, your life gets cut short, and now you have to take birth again in that same form of life.
Mm.
So, which was why Jod Barrett was not wanting to step on the ants, because he's like, if I don't need to kill them unnecessarily, their karma brought them into this ant life, and so therefore, I don't want to interfere with that
Right.
type of thing.
But then, sure, the Prabhupada also killed mosquitoes, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean,
He called them aggressors, I think. This is a story,
aggressors.
actually. I wasn't alive.
Yeah.
But I heard that he was calling them aggressors, and that things that, like, I guess infiltrate your house or do certain things that would be considered that they're disrupting your life enough. Okay.
You're
But I mean,
climbing into my
there's a
cereal
lot.
box.
Yeah.
You're going down.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want cereal. I need my Cheerios in the morning. But
Dude, I
yeah, I don't know. I mean,
exterminate so many of them.
there's so many,
Yeah.
not loopholes, but there's so many like gray areas, I think, within this. But
Oh yeah.
that's why it's interesting to talk about, because it's not, you'll find different things said in different places, and some of it almost seems like they're in like conflict with one another. But typically, if you read enough or you get some clarification from
It gives you
someone
a better.
who read,
It paints more
they
of the
they
picture.
explain how it's the same message, even though it may
Yeah,
seem a little different, because it's based on the situation,
for
not on
sure.
one answer. It's like, when you're at work, you can't just do one thing every time. You have to do
Yeah,
whatever the patient actually needs.
that's very true.
They may have the same symptoms but need something different. So
That's a good analogy. All right, continuing here. The undertaking of soul research would certainly mark the advancement of science. But no matter how much science advances, they will not be able to find the soul. The soul's presence can simply be accepted on circumstantial understanding. For here you will find in the Vedic literature that the dimension of the soul is 1/10,000th the size of a point of hair. or a point. Here it says a point, but oftentimes it says, like, if you take a piece of your hair and you look at just the tip of it and you cut that into 10,000 pieces and took one of them, that's them trying to give some type of like quantifying size to the soul, but what they mean really is just that
you can't see it.
It's minuscule, it's microscopic, atomic, subatomic, whatever. Yeah. But yet it's so powerful that spark is what gives life to the whole entire body.
Yeah.
Like, the soul's presence can simply be accepted on circumstantial understanding. And this is very scientific too, because, right, like scientists want to talk about black holes or stars or whatever. You can't see those things physically with your eyes, right? Like a black hole, but through, like measuring the gravity and, gravitational lensing, there's all kinds of different like ways that they can infer that, well, it appears that something exists there, we just can't see it. And so he's saying you can do the same thing with the soul, which is really awesome.
Right.
Therefore, it is not possible for the material scientist to capture the soul. You can simply accept the soul's existence by taking it from higher authorities. What the greatest scientists are now finding to be true, we've explained long ago. As soon as one understands the existence of the soul, he can immediately understand the existence of God. The difference between God and the soul is that God is a very great soul and the living entity is a very small soul. Another place he put it like, God, basically you can think of it, he is the soul of the entire creation. Right? We're the soul of this body, he's the soul of the entire creation. So, we have the same qualities again.
Yeah.
That's another thing they always harp on. Qualitatively, we're the same as God.
Yeah.
But quantitatively, we're insignificant compared to him.
Yeah.
But qualitatively, they are equal. God is all-pervading, and the living entity is localized, but the nature and quality are the same.
Yeah.
The central question, you say, is, quote, where is the soul and where does it come from, end quote. That is not difficult to understand. We have already discussed how the soul is residing in the heart of the living entity and how it takes shelter in another body after death. Originally, the soul comes from God. Just as a spark that comes from a fire appears to be extinguished when it falls away from the fire, the spark of the soul originally comes from the spiritual world to the material world. Another analogy he uses is the sunshine, or the sun, like the rays of the sunshine and the sun. So the sun is the source of the sunshine, but the sunshine has the same qualities as the sun, namely light and heat.
Yeah.
So light and heat, you get it from the sunshine, but also from the sun, but yet the sunshine is not the sun. It's coming from, very, I like how a lot of his analogies use the physical world around us, and it just goes to show that, like, everywhere you look kind of hints at what the Vedic scriptures talk about, the way God has his creation, the way, like a tree coming from a little seed, or they're like, just looking at nature, kind of, all the analogies that he uses are right there, and it just it's amazing.
Yeah, it's like they compare it to, we probably said this before, but the a drop of water or a cup of water from the ocean versus the entire ocean.
Yeah,
has the same quality, same salt water, but it's not.
It's not the ocean.
No.
In the material world, the soul falls down into three different conditions called the modes of nature, or goodness, passion, and ignorance. When a spark of fire falls on dry grass, the fiery quality continues. When the spark falls on the ground, it cannot display its fiery manifestation unless some combustible materials are present. So I'm assuming our body is the combustible material.
Right.
And when the spark falls on water, it is extinguished. In this way, we find the soul takes up three kinds of living conditions. One living entity is completely forgetful of his spiritual nature, so that's the mode of ignorance.
Yeah.
Another is almost forgetful, but still has an instinct of spiritual nature, so mode of passion. And another is completely in search of spiritual perfection, mode of goodness, or yeah.
Yeah.
There is a bona fide method for the attainment of spiritual perfection by the spiritual spark, or soul. And if he is properly guided, he is very easily sent back home, back to Godhead, from where he originally fell. It will be a great contribution to human society if this authorized information from the Vedic literature is presented on the basis of modern scientific understanding. The facts are already there. It simply has to be presented for modern understanding. If the doctors and scientists of the world can help man understand the science of the soul, this will be a very great contribution. Sincerely yours, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
It would
That's
be a
really cool.
great... I love it. He's not sitting there saying, no, you can't be a scientist. He's saying, use your science to help explain this so that other people will say, wow, the scientist explained it very well. I'm gonna jump right on that. Like, that's great.
Yeah. It's really great. He's like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Man, I wish I could have met Prabhupada.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom that people like so dedicated, so focused, so singularly studied.
Oh man, I know. Like, he's like a laser beam. He just cuts right through.